Cali X here on this hump day, and forgive my voice, just dealing with some allergies and stuff like that. So forgive that. It just is what it is at this point. Can't talk too well. But I appreciate my guy Yo in the building already. Y'all make sure to bang that like for me as y'all come through. We're going to talk a few things here today. We're going to talk inactivity, chronic inactivity. Have things gotten better since last year with activity? Will they ever get better, et cetera, et cetera? We'll also talk about, D Styles podcast last night when they talked in the first hour about VADA testing, drug testing, et cetera. What I also want to talk about is Canelo versus Jamel, my thoughts from the press conference, but more in particular, my thoughts as to Canelo's interview this morning, I believe it was, with the Breakfast Club, because there were some pull quotes from that. There were some interesting things to take from that as far as how much longer should we expect Canelo to be around. I very much enjoy that some of these fighters are going above the boxing media to do interviews right now. And I understand the frustrations that people have when they say things like, yeah, but you have to listen to the questions they're asking them. Listen, they're asking this guy about fighting a fighter 3 weight classes lesser or 2 weight. They don't understand that because they're casuals. I get it. But one thing I enjoy is listening to these fighters. And I think when they do interviews with these outlets, the casual outlets that are bigger, they can let their guard down and we actually get more information from these fighters. When we put aside the casual questions that are asked of them, they're actually asked good questions and they'll let their guard down more because they know they're not in there with a confrontational boxing media who is looking to get certain clicks. A lot of them are looking to get clicks because boxing world is small and they have to work harder to get their clicks than the big media who sees a boxer come on and they say, oh, it's a boxer. It's just a boxer. We can just ask them questions. And there's no ill intent towards these boxers as they come on. And these boxers feel the need to just put their guard down and they answer the questions. And we actually get more information from them. And I'm not saying media outlets like the Breakfast Club don't do that in their particular genre. I know there are bad things about these media outlets outside within their genre, but when it comes to boxing, I'm telling you, the reason we get more information from these fighters when they do these bigger media interviews with non-boxing media is they can go in there and just let their guard down. And that's it. They don't have to worry about, in particular, the bigger YouTube channels coming at them sideways because they're pushing an agenda to get clicks. They know they don't have access to certain fighters, so they can toss that fighter to the side and push agendas against that fighter in order to get their clicks. And that's just what we have. So it's been enjoyable for me to see guys like Bud Crawford and Canelo Alvarez be more accessible to bigger media. And we're finding out more of who these guys actually are, how they think, how much longer they plan to be around. And it's enjoyable to watch. Shout out my guy Chicano Prophet. Salute to you. Athletic Mind. Salute to you. Bruce Gas. Appreciate you always coming through. The interview's been great. They have. Shout out my guy Will Boxing. Hit that like button. Yeah, y'all do that. Make sure to bang that like button for me. Boom. If you do one thing, do that for me. And make sure you vote on that poll. There's a reason that I'm asking that question in the poll. Do you think that fighters who fight once per year should be privy to awards such as Fighter of the Year? And there's a reason I'm asking it. The reason I'm asking it is it seems like our expectations of fighters have come down significantly, and people who are new to the game or people who are forgetful of the past, of our history, of our roots in boxing, don't know how far we've gone from 30 years ago. And I'm about to give you a specific example of that. How far our expectations have come down. How little we now expect of fighters. And just me saying this right now, I already understand how some people are going to view that, how some people will come at me for saying something like that. Oh my God, you're anti-fighter. Oh my God, look at him. He thinks he's in the Roman Coliseum and he wants to see people ripped to shreds by a tiger. That's not what this is. That's not what this is. We need to have higher expectations of our fighters. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is there's a time and place for everything. And beware right now. I said this about what was it, a month or two ago when we had another lull in the schedule, in the boxing schedule. This is generally when you get the guys who go for the interviews of fighters and they try to get pull quotes from these fighters on purpose. They do this knowing what they're doing going into the interview. And like I said, I'm glad Canelo and Bud are going above them and doing interviews with bigger outlets. But they do that to get clicks. Why? Because it's slow. And everybody sees that. Everybody sees the numbers go up, down, depending on what the boxing schedule is doing. So when the boxing schedule is dead, as it is now for the next couple of weeks, you're going to see dudes out here reaching with narratives. So just beware of that. Beware of any narrative that is out there right now, because they'll be out there pushing it, because they're not going to come on here by themselves, talk about just boxing, talk about inactivity, talk about, interviews. They're not going to be doing that. They're going to be out there reaching for clicks because it's all they have. It's all they have. So beware of that. Beware of it. But the reason I bring it up now is we're in a lull. There's a time and place for everything. So now it's the time to talk about it. In general, I think boxing channels have trouble, have a hard time of balancing. You have a lot of channels out there of guys my age, older, generally that demographic, who just basically crap on all fighters of this era and say this era sucks. And I have to wonder at that point, if everything is so bad, why are you still doing a boxing channel? Why are you on here talking about boxing if you're just constantly negative, negative, negative? So you have to talk about the positives of what's going on right now. We're actually getting fights. So we do that here. HCP, we talk about every fight. We were talking about Richard Torres Jr., Emiliano Vargas. I did videos about the undercard of the zone, that crappy card, Anthony Joshua. I still talked about it. You still talk about the fights. You still talk about stuff we get. But you also have to highlight the negative and reel the other guys in, because the guys generally younger who came into the game later, they don't have the proper perspective to know that, look, dude, what we're going through right now in 2023 is not hot. It's just not. It's a great year as compared to 2022, 2018, 2016, but it's not a hot year. Historically, it's just not. And I'm about to highlight one of the reasons why. So you also have to do that balance. Look, not everything is negative, older guys. Not everything's negative. All right. We have some positives, but you guys on the other side, we need to reel you back in, because you think things now are greater than they've ever been. You want me, Cali X Boxing, to get on here and get on my knees and worship the ground that the Steven Espinosas and the Al Haymans walk on. It's just not going to happen. Oh my God, PBC, thank you for this great year that you've given us. Thank you for all the fights. Look at what the PBC is giving you. Oh my God, and you can't even graduate. No, do your job. Do your job. It's your job to put on fights, correct? Okay, so I'm supposed to praise you for doing your job. How about you do that next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, and then maybe we'll talk. Because you've given me all these crappy years before this. And finally you wake up, and now I'm supposed to praise these dudes and worship these dudes. Oh my God. Oh my God. I want to thank God, but first let me thank Al Heyman. No, go to hell. Oh, sorry. We're not going to do that. So we need to reel those guys in too. Oh my God, the fighters of today are so much more athletic than fighters 30, 50, 60, 80, 100 years from now. Oh my God, this is the greatest era. We're in the golden era of boxing. Look at the year we're having. No, sorry. No. I heard Rick Barry talking about this in basketball. He's like, can these referees in basketball in the NBA please call it travel? Oh my God, can they please call it travel? Can a referee call a carry? A dude is doing this. He's literally doing this coming down the court. Can they call a carry? I took one game. This is Rick Barry speaking. And I counted just the moving screens, 59 moving screens in one game. Can they please call a moving screen? We didn't have hyperbolic chambers. We didn't have performance enhancers. We didn't have specialty coaches. We didn't have super padded tennis shoes. We were playing in Converse All-Stars, for the love of God. Of course, players now look better. Look at what we had to go through. If I had all of this, I would have been better too. These dudes can't put things into proper perspective. They just can't. They can't. They can't put anything into proper perspective. And I'm about to highlight, appreciate y'all for coming through, everybody. And I'm going to talk about this too, because I don't care, quite frankly. I don't. Like, pop dirty, didn't pop dirty. I don't care, because it's the same thing over and over again. You dudes, this war on drugs and boxing, you need to read me the scoreboard. You need to read me the scoreboard. How many dudes have you caught who didn't have an excuse, that the excuse ended up being acceptable, and then we all moved on with our lives? So I'm supposed to sit here and care about Alicia Baumgardner, whatever, popping dirty? I don't care. I'm sorry. Don't care. So that's my my spiel, and I'll give more of that on the drug testing in a bit. Activity matters. Activity matters. Activity matters. Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, it does. All of them fight once a year. What choice do we have? Yeah. Bruce is right. Bruce is right. And let me highlight this real quick. Look at this right here. And Bruce will know this. Let me take this comment down real quick. Bruce, a historian, will know this. This is Ring Magazine pound for pound list, end of year 1993. Why did I take 1993? It's not because 1993 was a super active year and I'm just trying to crap on new age fighters. I just found a year that was super active 30 years ago or so. And no, this is typically what your pound for pound list looked like as far as activity throughout the 90s. We highlighted this last year with 1997, 25 years ago, where the pound for pound champ, Oscar De La Hoya, at the time, Ring Magazine, fought 5 times, 5 title fights in 1 year, every other month. And I think the top 10 pound for pound at that point fought around 30 times, something like that. 1993, I took this year because it's 30 years ago. If you want to take 1992, you want to take 1994, go ahead. It looks the same. But this is Pernell Whitaker. How many times did Pernell Whitaker fight in 1993? He was on the lower end, 2. How many times did Julio Cesar Chavez fight? Number 2 in 1993. He fought 6 times. 6. And I already know what the new age dudes are going to do, but look who he fought. Look who he fought. It's the Avni Yildirim thing all over. They can't put anything into proper perspective. Canelo fought Avni Yildirim, who was his mandatory, who, by the way, was also David Benavidez's mandatory before David Benavidez dropped his belt on the scale. But Avni Yildirim's the mandatory. When does he fight Avni Yildirim? He fights him in February. Why is that important? Because in December, 2 months before, he fought another fight, title fight. May, 3 months later, he fights another title fight. He fights 4 times in 11 months, and you dudes are hung up on Avni Yildirim. Would you rather Canelo not fight that fight at all? Would you rather Canelo just skip the February date, fight January, not fight as mandatory, fight again in May? Would you rather that? It's the Canelo Spence thing all over again. How do you dudes have Errol Spence higher on the pound for pound list when he's fought twice in the same amount of time that Canelo fights 6 times? It does not make sense to me. They can't put anything into proper perspective. Chavez fought Hogan and Whitaker in the same year. Same year. But they'll be hung up on the other 3 or 4 guys. James Toney. How many times did James Toney fight in 1993? Number 3. He fought 7 times. 7. So this is my point right here. Listen to this. The number 2 and the number 3 pound for pound fighters in the world in 1993, 30 years ago, it's just 30 years ago, will fought the same amount of times that the top 10 pound for pound fought in 2022 combined. Combined, 13. Do you know what we're on pace for this year? 14. Chavez Jr., James Toney did that by themselves in one calendar year. Michael Carbajal, number 4, fought 3 times. Canizales fought 3 times. Evander Holyfield, twice. Ricardo Lopez, 4 times. Roy Jones Jr., 4 times. Kennedy McKinney, 3 times. Arbachakov, 3 times. That's what these guys were fighting. We had 0 of the top 10 pound for pound fighting one time. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. And that's why I asked the question, because the goalposts have been moved. This propaganda has been pushed out so frequently that we're so far away from our roots and don't even realize it. They'll brainwash you into thinking that once per year is normal for a fighter. And then I have fighters on, like me and D-Style will have them on the ACP, and we have the young guys on in particular, 22, 24 years old. And I especially if I know who they're with. If I find out they're with PBC or Samson, I'll specifically ask them 2 questions. I'll ask them, are you bothered at all by your inactivity? Would you rather more dates? And I already know by their answer that they've already been beat down by the system at 22, 24 years old. And I like these kids. I like them. I'm a cheer for them. But I already know what the answer is going to be. I already know what they've been told to say. And I already see it. And I already see where this is going, where it's headed. I want to fight more. Yeah. But, I'm going to trust my management. I'm going to trust my advisor. You'll get that type of answer. The other question we'll ask them in particular, because we know what the networks do and these guys are exclusive to certain networks. If this fight came about, would you be willing to go over to DAZN or ESPN to fight these fights? And we ask those questions purposely. And these guys say, well, I got to talk to my manager. And these are young guys. Fighters should be saying stuff like anytime, any place, wherever, and they're not saying that anymore, even at young ages, and it's sad to see. It's sad to see. But I see something like this. The top 10 pound for pound in 1993 fought a combined 37 times. Almost 4 fights average per fighter. None of them fought once. None of them fought less than 2 times in the year. Take the top 10 pound for pound right now. Bud Crawford's number 1. How many times is Bud Crawford likely going to fight this year? Realistically, once. Realistically. Maybe they'll fit in a rematch in December. I doubt that. Don't hold your breath. But once. Inoue will likely fight twice. He's fought once so far. He'll likely fight twice. Usyk, you're likely going to get one. You're likely going to get one. I don't believe that they're going to make a Fury fight by December. You're likely going to get one fight from Usyk this year. He's number 3. Canelo. Canelo's reliable. He'll give you 2 fights this year. 2 fights. Dimitri Bivol. Is he going to fight this year? He'll likely give you 1. We'll give him 1. He'll likely give you 1. Errol Spence Jr., he's likely going to give you 1. Just took a beat down. I don't believe that rematch is going to happen in December. He'll likely give you 1. Haney will likely give you 2 at number 7. Tank will likely give you 3, even though it's not the 3 fights we want to see. Teofimo may give you 2. Let's just count that. Let's just say Teofimo gives you 2. He may fight on Heisman weekend. Let's give him 2. Loma once. He's going to fight once this year. Bob Arum has already said that. Don't expect Loma back in 2023. So combined, top 10, if it stays static for the rest of the year, top 10 pound for pound, same publication, Ring Magazine, will give you 14 fights combined this year. 13 last year, 14 this year. So you stay on that 1.3, 1.4 fights per fighter. And by the way, that extends out, as we've explained. Top 50, top 100, top 150, pound for pound list. It stays 1.3, 1.4. It may get you to 1.5. So this is trickled all the way down. And what I'm telling you is just 30 years ago, Just 30 years ago, you had the top 10 pound for pound fighting a combined 37 times. These aren't prospects, fellas. Chavez, Tony, James Toney fighting 7 times. Fighters were fighters. So that's why I asked this poll question. That's why I ask it. Should a fighter who fights once in a year get fighter of the year? We should have higher expectations of these fighters. We should. I'm sorry. A fighter who shows up once in a year and you're going to hand them over a fighter of the year award. You're going to hand over what should be a full-time award to a part-time fighter. And I'm asking why? Why is that? Why is that? My vote is no. My vote is emphatically no. If I put hell no on here, it will be hell no. There is no depends. None of that. And fair enough, man. If you think it depends on the situation, there are actually historical examples of guys fighting once in a year and getting fighter of the year from big publications. There is. So if you're one of those people, fine, man. I get it. But our expectations need to rise as boxing fans. I'm not one of these jaded boxing fans. I'm not one of these old guys, these old fuddy-duddies sitting on the front porch, throwing stuff at the skateboard. I'm going to call the police on you. Stop riding the skateboard on my sidewalk, up and down the sidewalk. I'm not one of those dudes. I enjoy these big fights. But that's the thing. Even these big fights, fellas, even the big fights, it's like Marlowe in The Wire. Marlowe walks into the co-op. He walks into that press conference room and he says, the price of the brick went up. And oh, by the way, co-op is done. We're done with that. You want to get at me? Call my guy over here. We're done. And that's boxing. It's anything is going to be offloaded on the customer. We're getting less of what we want, but the price of that is going up. And that's just not just inflation. It seems like we have a higher burden. I'm listening to Gabe Montoya and Beeb last night on the first hour with D-Style, and I'm just sitting back and listening. And I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, I appreciate that these dudes are educated on this topic. I appreciate that they're smart enough to talk about this and give it in detail to their, and then have a civil discussion, even though they have disagreements. I appreciate all this, but I just keep going back to, as a boxing fan, why do I care about this? At some point, you have to read me the scoreboard, and you cannot tell me as a boxing fan that I need to care more about these issues than the journalists who are covering them and paid to cover them, the fighters, and the power brokers who are overseeing them. My questions would be, how many A samples, how many positive A samples have we never heard of? How many times has a journalist gotten wind of a guy with a positive A sample and didn't report on it? Because maybe he reached out to the power broker, the overseer, whoever's in charge of the camp, and they were not given permission to report on it, and they didn't want to lose access to these fighters and promotional outfits. They didn't want to lose access to credentials, so they simply didn't report on it. And the reason that I ask these questions is, when we worked for Hailstorm Sports and this story fell in our lap that Eric Morales had a positive A sample, we report on it after going through 3 different sources. And I'm thinking to myself, as I work my full-time job and I'm calling to get confirmation from New York State Athletic Commission, all these people, as I work a full-time job, as D-Style Boxing is trying to report on this before he goes into his night shift, as Scott Hale of Hailstorm Sports is working a full-time job and doing this as well. We're not even journalists. And I'm thinking to myself, there is just no way that we're the first journalists to hear about this story. There's just no way. I'm sorry, there's just no way. The sources are great. I appreciate that they gave us a story, but I just don't believe that we were the first person they reached out to. Just don't believe it. And on top of that, when I called the New York State Athletic Commission to get their official response to this, thinking that, oh, you found out, okay, their official response is, we don't know. We didn't know about this. And I believe them. So I'm thinking to myself, how many A samples have been swept under the rug? The Athletic Commission didn't know about it. The fans didn't know about it. But the power brokers, the fighters in their camps, some journalists, they knew about it, but we likely never heard about it. What's the percentage? What's the percentage? And then it rubs me the wrong way, man. It rubs me the wrong way when I get less and I'm told to take on more. If you go to a job and your manager delegates more to you, I need you to do this. On top of that, I need you to do this and this and this, and your pay is not going up. In some cases, you may get a pay cut, but you're taking on more responsibility. What are you going to do? You're going to leave. As soon as something else comes up, you'll go on LinkedIn or whatever, monster.com, you start shopping your resume. As soon as something better comes along, you're gone. You're gone. And that's what's happened in America with boxing. There's a reason there's been a mass exodus. There's a reason that this sport has grown globally, but nationally, domestically, it's shrinking. We have more options here. And people are going out there and they're saying, you know what? This option looks really good. I'm tired of dealing with this. I'm going to go over here. It's just that simple. Probably 80% or higher. I wouldn't doubt it. When I have trainers telling me, when I have dudes off the record, they're telling me the reason inactivity is so high is because cycling on, cycling off. When I hear all this stuff, I say to myself, these journalists know this. The power brokers know this. The fighters know this. So why am I as a fan going to care more about this than them? I'm not paid to do that. My job is to show up and look at the TV. My job is to pay for the pay-per-views. My job is to show up to the fights. I do all of that. That's my job. I'm doing that. Why am I going to take on extra stuff and get less? It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. And I'm not going to apologize for that. It's not going to happen. It's simply not going to happen. But even in a great year like this, fellas, we shouldn't have lulls in the schedule. August is generally the slow month for boxing, but we shouldn't have lulls in the schedule with the big rosters of fighters out there. We shouldn't. We shouldn't have a couple weeks like we have coming up right now. We just shouldn't. And on top of that, the big fights that we're getting, we're paying extra for. Not only has the price of the brick gone up as far as subscriptions for these platforms, but on top of that, the big fights that we get are on pay-per-view. Think of every big fight we've had this year. What, 80, 90% of them have been an extra paywall, pay-per-view. That's just the current model, man. It's a country club sport here. But I'm just showing you how far away from our roots we've come when you see this right here. When you see 37 fights combined. Fellas, do you know what that is? They're 52 weeks in a year? And these guys fought 37 combined. We have enough fighters to where we could have big fights every weekend. If not big fights, we should have competitive fights every weekend. We should never be on here sitting on a Wednesday and not have a fight coming up this weekend to talk about. And that's what we have this weekend. There's just nothing to talk about that's coming up this weekend. And this is when you're going to have guys reaching with their clicks and spreading false narratives and all this stuff. Because when there's nothing going on, dudes just eat each other alive. They get bored and eat each other alive. 37 times they fought in a 52-week period. We get 14, maybe 14 if things go right. 14. 14. We barely get one per month of a top 10 fighter fighting a fight. And we hope that they fight a good fight. And that's not always the case. Look at Tank, for the love of God. It's amazing to me. Our expectations are so low. And we wonder why currently we have 17 titles out of 68 in America. 17. And one of them's Raleigh. And one of them's Maul, who hasn't fought in 800 days. What are we doing? We wonder why our fighters are underperforming. When they do something, it's like, oh my God, it's immaculate. It's immaculate when we do something. It's immaculate when one of our fighters does something. We should be praising them. Look at what he's doing, Calix. Why are you complaining? Look at what Al Heyman is giving you. Oh my God. And you're still out here complaining. I just want to see him do more of it. And oh, by the way, I like him not to charge me extra when he does it. It's American boxing fans, man, they're miserable. If I put, because I see people's top 10 pound for pound list popping up right now. What do you think happens to me if I put Navarrete in my top 10 pound for pound on Twitter? What do you think happens to me? I'm tired of picking up the slack as a boxing fan. I'm tired of being told I need to praise these dudes for doing their job. When a power broker does their job, finally, I'm supposed to praise them. No, sorry. We're not going to do that. I'm not picking up your slack. It happens every time, man. It happens every time. You're hit with it on the back end. It happens with the government all the time. They tell you they're giving you something for free. You better check your other pocket. I'm just telling you, free is expensive. And when these dudes come out and promise me no pay-per-views, free boxing for all, no pay-per-views on the zone, am I supposed to be surprised when I'm getting less fights on the back end? And oh, by the way, it's more expensive. Of course I'm not. Not surprised at all. I'm just aggravated because we've been trying to warn you. We've been trying to warn you. They'll tell you they give you $1,000 and they'll flamboyantly put it in your left pocket, but they'll quietly take out $5,000 from your right pocket. It happens every time. They hit you on the back end. No different with the power brokers in boxing. No different. Why is it that they were telling me all this was going to be free? It sounded too good to be true, and it was, because now everything's expensive and I get less of it and I get less quality. And just me doing this, and I waited till a lull in the schedule to do it, to talk about inactivity, chronic inactivity, some of the ills that we still have, how we still have a shaky foundation underneath us. You have some great fights happening up here, but look underneath you still got a shaky foundation. This is not sustainable. And you say all this and you warn them about a country club atmosphere in boxing, how everything's too expensive. And I already know how this is going to be taken. Oh, stop complaining. Stop complaining. Look at the old guy on the porch throwing stuff at the skateboarders, calling 911. I already know how that's going to be perceived. I already know. But it is what it is. There should be a minimum that boxers have to meet for fights per year, no matter who it is. In order to get these full-time awards, yeah. Rob Peter to pay Paul mentality is not a sustainable model. Remember when boxing would be on ABC's Worldwide of Sports? I know I follow college football as a better product for a fraction of the price. It is. The one thing that I will warn you on with college football, though, is you look at the landscape and how it's moving, how West Coast teams are moving to East Coast conferences and all this realignment and stuff. You have to keep tradition alive as well for traditionalists. We have to evolve, but you have to keep tradition alive for traditionalists. If not, they're not going to stick around. I remember getting into college football at 6, 7, 8 years old. And how did I do it? Because I'm sitting there on Thanksgiving weekend watching all the rivalry games with my uncle and my dad. And you're taking those rivalry games away due to the money. That's what you're doing. And the same thing is happening in boxing. I see the 1993 Ring Magazine pound for pound rankings, and I say, we are nowhere close to this. How do you keep people interested? How do you get them emotionally invested in fighters? How do you build superstars when these guys are fighting a combined 14 times in a year, a combined 13 times in a year, as opposed to 37? How? We're having a hot year in boxing, fair enough, but we're doing it when our top 10 pound for pound has fought what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 times in the first 8 months. How? Just imagine what would happen if these guys actually fought. Imagine it. Imagine the type of year you would have, and imagine boxing having some sort of renaissance to where it's seen as a big sport again. That's what you would have if you had these guys fighting 3 to 4 times per year again. If you had a year in which the top 10 pound for pound fought a combined 30 times again in a year, watch what would happen. Just watch. Just watch. But it's too much to ask for now. It's just too much to ask for. We can't do it. You can't do it. You're seen as the guy sitting there at the Roman Coliseum, watching a guy get ripped to shreds by a tiger. If you just ask for these fighters to fight 3 times in a year, you just can't do it. You can't do it. And I think there's a brainwashing campaign. Don't get me wrong. I think economics get in the way, politics get in the way. I get all that. But I don't believe it's a safety issue. I don't. I just don't. You can't tell me that these fighters draining themselves. I see Regis Prograis on Twitter in the bathtub looking like he's dying, trying to get down to 140. These guys are draining themselves down, and they can only do it once in a year. You can't tell me that's good for their bodies, and you can't tell me it's good for the sport. You can't do it. You can't do it. Canelo Alvarez. You know, I'm watching Canelo Alvarez. I'm watching his press conference with Jermell Charlo. And the press conference between Canelo and Jermell was, some would say lackluster, some would say calm. But I think Mel has a respect for Canelo that he didn't have for previous opponents. That's obvious. He sees him as a cash cow. He sees him as a great. So he's not going to approach Canelo in a sideways manner that he did other fighters. So that's part of it. And then Canelo, we know how Canelo behaves. As long as Canelo gets respect from his opponent, he's going to give it back. It's just as simple as that. If you're interviewing Canelo and you respect Canelo, he's going to give you the respect back. It's just as simple as that. And you're actually going to get more information from him. The Breakfast Club interview proved that. You're going to get more information out of him. I got more information out of the Breakfast Club interview. And for the love of God, it's the Breakfast Club. These dudes are brain dead. The Breakfast Club. This shows you how bad the boxing media is, particularly American boxing media. They can't get anything out of these fighters. I got more out of the Breakfast Club interview as far as Canelo Alvarez than I could get from any of these boxing content creators. But I'm watching it. Canelo shows respect for Jermell because Jermell's showing respect for Canelo. Jermell's not showing that energy to where he's going to come up and slap Canelo. He's not talking about his wife. He's not talking about steroids or any of this stuff. Just shows him respect. Canelo shows him respect back. And a press conference is a press conference. People will say, this isn't going to sell a fight. Look, Canelo versus Jermell is going to sell the fight. Undisputed versus undisputed is going to sell a fight. Look at what happens when you build up a fight organically. You don't even have to build it up. Canelo versus Jermell came out of left field, but there's still organic build because he won titles. He won titles. Yes, it's a 2-weight class jump, but the guy coming from 154 actually looks bigger than the guy from 168. They start off at the same weight class. One guy is still able to drain himself down to 154. I doubt that he goes back down to 154, by the way. Canelo has aged himself out of those lower weight classes. He's telling the Breakfast Club people who are asking about Crawford, he's like, I can't do it. I can't get down to 160 anymore. I'm sorry. I know you guys might want the Bud Crawford fight, but there's just no way I'm getting down there again. He looks small for the weight class. He says, I'm actually small for 160, maybe even for 154. So this fight makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense for the time. So we find that out about him. Another thing that I like about the Canelo interview with the Breakfast Club is Charlemagne at times is besides himself. He's like, look, if these dudes are asking for it, why not just give it to them? What he's meaning is, if these fighters are asking to fight you, why not just give them the ass whooping? Bud Crawford, and that's all due respect to Bud Crawford, because I think Bud was just willy-nilly throwing it out there. I don't think he was serious. He's saying the same thing about Tank, right? But he's asking, like, if he wants an ass whooping at 158, why not just give it to him? And Canelo saying, I just can't make the weight. But the other guy he's asking about is Jake Paul. And I thought that was an important part of the interview. Why? Because it shows how Canelo views legacy. And it also shows that his interests align with the boxing fans' interests. Yes, Canelo worries about the money. He said that. I always worry about the money. Yes, we always take into account the money, but it has to make sense. It's about legacy. So why would I fight? He's got to be thinking, why would I fight the Disney character, dude? It's amazing to me, man. Like, my son had it on his tablet the other day. It's like Jake Paul rapping with his friends. And I'm like, what is this? First of all, it's got cussing in it. Turn it off. But what the hell is this? This dude's a dweeb. But Canelo's got to be viewing it the same way. He's looking at Jake Paul and he's like, he's dismissive. He just starts laughing. But he's saying, he's basically saying, it's beneath me. It's beneath me. I cannot fight a Jake Paul. That cannot be on my official record. And it shows the difference between a Tyson Fury and a Canelo Alvarez. Tyson Fury can go over there and fight Ngannou. It shows the difference between Canelo and Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather views it as, I've given you enough in my career. I'm going for the back end money. I'm going to go fight a guy who is 0-0, make a crap load of money. I can't even blame Floyd for that. I can't even blame him for robbing the bank there. But I'm going to go over here and fight the guy who's 0-0, get this quick win, make a lot of money. But he's got Conor McGregor on his official resume, fellas, at 0-0. Canelo views it differently. And I've talked about this I mean, Floyd still kept his fan base. Tyson Fury is still keeping and expanding a fan base, but it's in a different manner. The reason that Canelo Alvarez cannot be detached from his fan base is the media did not build Canelo Alvarez. He built himself. He starts off with this organic Mexican fan base, and he builds it into a universal fan base. And he does that by simply fighting the fights. And as long as he continues to do that, you can't detach him from his fan base. You can't do it. And he knows it instinctively. That's the beautiful part. He knows, as long as I keep fighting the fights and fight for legacy, it's fine. The moment I go fight Jake Paul, yes, I'll make a ton of money short term. But at that point, it becomes a different thing. Even if I just step aside quickly and fight him and then fight another guy, it becomes a different thing at that point. I'm viewed differently legacy-wise. He knows that. He understands it. He understands legacy. Another thing I got was he wants to stay around 3-4 more years. He said it. I want to stick around 3-4 more years. So we're thinking maybe he's got another year or two, maybe this 3-fight deal and maybe another fight after that. But now he's saying 3 or 4 more years. And we know the guy fights at least 2 times per year. So you're getting 8 more fights out of Canelo. And to me, this is the fun part of a career for a boxer, for a legendary boxer, because this is when you start to see some diminished reflexes, diminished skills, but you still see them figuring it out, still in big fights. They're still willing to fight big fights. This isn't Floyd fighting Conor McGregor and Andre Berto. They're still willing to go in there and legacy-defining fights late in their career, and they try to figure it out. They try to figure out a way to beat these younger, hungrier guys, more inexperienced but hungrier guys at an advanced age, at an advanced point in their career. And that's the fun part. I very much enjoy that point in a fighter's career. But I got a lot from this interview. I got a lot from it. One of the things I got is he values legacy. He doesn't fear anybody. He's telling you when they ask about Benavidez, they said the same thing about Golovkin. They said the same thing about Trout. They said the same thing about Lara. Finally, Canelo is publicly coming out and saying this stuff. The stuff that we've tried to explain to people on here who are trying to build the Benavidez thing. At first, it's confusing to us, right? Because we say, Benavidez? He hasn't beat anybody, number one. Number two, he could have had this fight in December 2021 had he not dropped his belt on the scale. So it's confusing to us at first. That guy doesn't have the style you said Canelo ducks and has trouble with. You said Canelo likes fighting that style. You said he has trouble with lateral boxers, even though he's beaten guys like Lara and Trout and Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. So now this is the guy, and Canelo's explaining it to you in the interview. Whatever Al wants to do, we'll sit down after this fight. I'll sit down with Al and we'll discuss it, and whoever he wants to line up. Dude, I guarantee you, he's looking at Al and he's saying, this is a much easier, you have a much easier outfit than the other side, the Bivals of the world. This is much easier than fighting Golovkin and Bivol. It's just much easier. He'll go in there and he's willing to fight whoever Al puts in front of him. Charlo, Andre, Benavidez. You try to explain this to people and then they project their stuff onto you. Oh, you're just a Canelo fanboy. You try to explain it to him multiple times. Dude, we're a fan of fighters' actions. I didn't roll out of bed liking fighters like Canelo Alvarez. That's not what I wanted to do. I saw Canelo out the gate. I said, his clothes are way too tight. Why is this dude riding a white horse on the beach? This isn't the type of energy I like. Why would I want to like a Mexican dude who looks like Richie Cunningham? Why would I want to do that out the gate? But over time, you get all this data. And it's like, this dude's fighting that fight, and he's fighting that fight, he's fighting that fight. This is an easy relationship. All I got to do is give him the money, and he goes and fights the fight. He might not do it at the exact moment you want at the time, but he does it. You told me he wasn't going to fight Golovkin. He fights him 3 times. I'm a Golovkin fan. He fights him 3 times. You told me he was going to duck Arislandi Lara, and he fights him. We had Roberto Diaz on here. Roberto Diaz, I asked him specifically, who are the guys you told Canelo not to fight? Trout and Lara. Guess what? He fights them. His team is telling him, do not fight these fights. These 2 fights, do not fight them. Canelo said, give me the fucking fights. And he goes and fights them. How is this difficult to understand how this dude has built this fan base? How is this hard for you? And how are you continuously ignoring the history? Roberto Diaz says it. He was supposed to fight Trout on the Mayweather undercard. He told Mayweather, if I'm going to fight on your undercard, I need you to guarantee that you fight me next. Mayweather told him to go to hell. Canelo told him to go to hell. So what does Canelo do? He says, let's fight Trout in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome. Roberto Diaz tries to talk him out of it. We're going to make less money if we do this on our own. We're going to make half the money. Canelo says, I don't care. Make the fight. On 6 weeks' notice. Goes to fight Trout in the Alamo Dome, 40,000 people, win the decision. He was tried to talk out of this by his team, fights the fight for half the money and wins. And you dudes are trying to do algorithms and trying to figure out why Canelo has this fan base that he has and why won't these dudes just stop liking Canelo? Why do you think? I have to beg dudes as a boxing fan to do stuff. And I got a dude who goes out and does stuff. So who do you think I'm going to like? Do you think if the waters are muddy, Who am I going to give the benefit of the doubt to? The dude who has fought every fight I've asked him to fight, or a guy like David Benavidez who has fought one fight in a decade? Who do you think I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to? Why is this difficult to understand? Why does this take so much unpacking to get you here? Why? Why is it so difficult to understand why Canelo versus Benavidez is not happening in September? Are you brain dead? Charlemagne's asking him, they're saying, you're ducking Benavidez. He's trying to explain it to him. He's trying to explain it to him without saying it. Dude, I don't fear anybody over there. Bring whoever. Charlo, Andre Benavidez, whoever, whatever they want to see, whatever. Just do it, whatever. He doesn't care. Imagine thinking this dude fears anybody over there. Just imagine thinking it. You try to explain it to dudes, man, and they just don't get it. And they keep on and on and on and on and on, just repeating history. It's like, dude, you should have learned here. You didn't learn there. You should have learned there. You didn't learn there. You should have learned there. I go back in my old channel. I still have videos up on my other PC. And I go back 6, 7, 8 years of videos I did around, when Canelo moves up to middleweight, and saying things like, I don't think he's going to fight that guy. I don't think he's going to fight. I think he's going to do just what Sergio did, just what Miguel Cotto did. I learned my lesson. I learned it. You don't keep repeating the history. The history is there was American monster. Then there was a Cuban monster. Then there was a Kazakhstani monster. Now there's a Mexican monster. Oh my God, we're all so fearful. Nobody's fearful. Nobody cares. We all want to see that fight. Make it. Who cares? Canelo's not out there fearing this dude at all. In fact, imagine me being over here gnashing my teeth, feeling so badly for a dude who drops a $10 million bag on the scale. And that's the facts of the matter. This dude would have had this fight in December 2021 for all the marbles had he just made weight. And they don't understand the differences either, because once again, they project their stuff onto us. And I have no problem, none. I try to explain to people that we're a fan of fighters' actions instead of fighters. However you want to take that. Say I'm a Canelo fan. So be it. Whatever. That's fine. And no problem with that label. But they'll try to project their stuff onto you, because what happens? When Deontay Wilder loses, he's poisoned, and the suit is too heavy. The suit's just too heavy for him, right? And then loaded gloves, all this stuff. When Spence loses, we saw what happened when Spence loses. Somehow it's anti-Semitic comments. It's all kind of stuff. These dudes just can't take an L. And they'll say things to me like, oh, you're going to eat those words, Calix. You're going to eat those words when Benavidez beats Canelo. If Mel beats Canelo, you're going to eat those words. You know what the reality of the situation is? Shout out to Nando. He's not in the chat right now, but this is a perfect example. He'll probably see it in playback. But this is a perfect example of it. When Bivol beat Canelo, let's say it was May 5th, you know what I did that night? I slept 8 hours. I slept like a baby. And then the next morning, I go to church on May 6th, spend time with the family, with the in-laws, all that stuff. May 7th, I come on and I say, Bivol is insane. That guy is a great fighter. That guy should be higher on the pound-for-pound list than he deserves. That was an amazing, immaculate performance, one of the best performances I've seen. That will be performance of the year. And if this guy fights again, he will be fighter of the year. And, oh, by the way, if he fights Canelo 10 times, he beats Canelo 9 out of the 10 times. And, oh, by the way, still love Canelo. Thank you for giving me the fights. This proves that this deal that you took was way, way harder than the deal you took or could have took over here. And I appreciate you for fighting the tough fights. And even at this late in your career, still fighting tough fights and going for legacy. That's how that went. And then May 8th, we moved on to other topics and everything was fine. And 17 days later, Canelo comes out and says, I'm going to fight Golovkin in September, Mexican Independence Day weekend. Let's have a good time. Trilogy. And I'm like, great. I'm there. And I go to the fight. Latinas, big booty Latinas are everywhere. We're just sitting back, loving them and drinking Modelo's. We had a great time, had a blast, watched Canelo beat Golovkin. And that's how that went. There was no, oh my God, Canelo lost, but Bivol cheated. No, Bivol cheated. Or Canelo, he just, he didn't have it that night. No, we gave Bivol his credit. And I remember Nando at the time telling me I was giving Bivol too much credit, and Nando was right. Why? Because in 2023, Bivol hasn't fought. Fight of the year in 2022, hasn't capitalized on that, and he reverts back to type. And Nando keeps telling me, the reason I highlight this is how high I was on Bivol at the time. And up to recently, I said, this is the guy. He could be pound for pound. He could be pound for pound champ one day. And Nando's in the chat saying, Calix, calm down. He's going to revert back to type. And guess what he does? He reverts back to type. And this is the reason why we like fighters over here and not so much fighters over here. We like the fighters who are fighting the fights, doing things consistently. And it's not hard to explain. It's not hard to understand, I should say, why we like guys like Canelo, why we like guys like Inoue. And they think that if Mel beats Canelo on September 30th, I'm just going to have some sort of mental breakdown. And on August 1st, I'm going to come on here August 2nd and say, oh my God, Mel cheated. He cheated. It's clear. Look at the glove. Look at the glove. It's bending like that. Look at it. Eddie Reynoso spiked Canelo's water. Why? I don't know, but he did it. He did it. They think we're going to come on here and have a mental breakdown. We don't. Why? Because we don't view losses the same way as they do. We don't care. We want fights coming off of theory, off of paper, and coming into reality. They don't. They want things staying mythically. Because it's easy to say your fighter beats this guy and that guy and that guy and that guy. I don't care. I don't care if Canelo's not viewed as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. It doesn't matter to me. In fact, I'm the type of dude that I give the benefit of the doubt to the dudes who fought 30, 40, 50 years ago. I'm listening to these dudes, and I'm a Bud Crawford fan. I've been one of the biggest Bud Crawford accounts on YTBC for a decade. But now I got dudes viewing me as some sort of Bud Crawford hater. Why? Because I don't think he beat Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard. In the 22-month span, he fought Benitez, Duran twice, and Hearns. Then he comes back a couple years ago. He fights Hagler. He fought Hearns. He fought Duran again. I mean, for the love of God. Dudes were doing crazier things back then. They were doing it in a more consistent fashion. Go look at how many times Hearns was fighting. Roberto Duran. This dude fought between 130 and 175 in his career. He fought Hagler at middleweight. It was too much for me to ask for Mayweather to fight Sergio Martinez at a catchweight. Martinez said, I'm willing to go to 155 to fight him. He's fought at 154. I'll fight him 1 pound heavier, and he can fight for the middleweight titles. That was too much to ask. Expectations, right? The expectations are different. It's too much to ask. You can't ask of that. But Roberto Duran goes up and fights Marvin freaking Hagler at middleweight. On top of all the other fights he had. And I'm supposed to give the benefit of the doubt to more current fighters who, if I asked them to go up one weight class, it's just too much. It's just way too much. Way too much. No, man. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. It's my default position. Sugar Ray Leonard, he fought 15-round fights, by the way. I'm going to assume he beats Bud Crawford. I'm going to assume Tommy Hearns, who starts off at welterweight, beats Bud Crawford. I'm sorry. I'm going to assume Roberto Duran beats Bud Crawford. I'm going to assume the guy who fought in 11 weight classes, Manny Pacquiao, beats Bud Crawford anywhere between 135, 147. It's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to assume that Floyd Mayweather, who fought, You know, we can be critical of what he did late in his career, but he fought 6 times in 1998, 2 years into his career, Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year. Hanero Hernandez for a title, legit title, 2 years into his career. And then 2 months later, defends against Angel Manfredi. I'm going to assume that guy beats Bud Crawford. I'm sorry. Just sorry. You know, and this is a Bud Crawford fan account. But I got to keep it real at the same time. Is the dude's a once per year fighter, fellas. He's been that way for a while. I'm sorry. And it's why I value fighters who fight more old school. 63 fights from Canelo. Manny Pacquiao, when he was fighting, he fought what, 70 times, something like that. He was fighting consistently, jumping weight classes. I'm gonna give more of the benefit of the doubt to those fighters. In a way, he's in his 5th weight class. You don't see fighters like that come along. It kills me, man. It destroys me. It destroys me. It destroys me. When I see obvious greatness right in front of me, and you have so many dudes who are just unwilling to give them any type of credit because of whatever reason. They just have some sort of hatred. Some dudes, they're just older and they can't give new age fighters any credit. There's part of that, right? And then you have other dudes, they decide early on, they don't like Canelo. Let's just use Canelo as an example. It's an easy one to use. And they have to bend the truth around everything in order to not give this dude any type of credit. And I'm just trying to point them in that direction and say, dude, just witness the greatness. Just enjoy the greatness, please. You don't have to like the dude, but you're not going to come out here and build faulty narratives to get people to believe whatever it is that you believe. It's not going to happen. I'm not saying you have to have this dude as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. I'm not saying you have to have him top 100 pound for pound all the time. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is compared to his peers of this era, he is destroying them. In a way, same thing. So enjoy it. Enjoy it. You don't have to like it, but come on. Be real for once. But these dudes expect you to break down if Canelo loses a fight, and it's not going to happen. If David Benavidez ends up beating Canelo Alvarez, you're going to be eating those words. No, I'm not. I'm not. I've been over here waiting for 9.5 years for this dude to fight some fights. So if it finally happens, good. Good for him. But up to this point, I'm supposed to believe that he's a Mexican monster based off of what? What am I basing that off of? Why are you trying so hard to get me to believe that? And I'll see these dudes and I'll say, oh, I get it. I know where you were before. You were saying at the time that it was Golovkin that was going to be the Canelo killer. And that didn't happen. Then Lara was going to be the Canelo killer. And that didn't happen. Trout was going to be the Canelo killer. Didn't happen. Now Benavidez is going to be the Canelo killer. And what I try to tell them is nobody's going to be the Canelo killer. Why are you still out here trying to get people to believe Benavidez is the Canelo killer when Bivol beat him last year? But Bivol isn't the Canelo killer. Why? Because losing a fight doesn't kill you. It's a loss. If Canelo loses to Benavidez, let's say September 15th, 2024, September 16th, 2024, I'll come out and do a video and say, great job, Benavidez. Maybe Canelo wins a rematch, maybe not. I appreciate you, Canelo, for constantly fighting the fights people say you're afraid of fighting, and you constantly fight the fights that people say you're afraid of fighting. And these dudes still aren't going to wake up. And then one day Canelo's going to be retired. And then I guess they're going to find somebody else. They're going to find somebody else to be miserable about. I guess that's what it's going to be. I'm watching this interview and I see a dude completely comfortable in his skin on the Breakfast Club. Just answering questions. And the questions are easy to answer if you don't have anything to lie about. If you have truth on your side. You don't have anything to lie about. You can just sit back there comfortably when you don't have a divisive media member in front of you asking you questions, coming at you sideways about why are you ducking this guy and that guy, because they're miserable and they're looking for their clicks. They're just in front of you asking questions. You can sit there comfortably in your pajamas or whatever Canelo's out there wearing. Dude's out there wearing pajamas, and Jermell Charlo's out there wearing Uggs and sweaters in August for whatever reason. I don't know why these dudes wear what they wear. It is what it is. But I'm watching and I'm observing, and I see a dude completely comfortable in his skin because he can be. He knows his legacy is already cemented. He knows he wants to do more work, but he's going to fight the fights. Why is he going to fight the fights? Because he's a fighter. He says it in the interview. He says, boxing's my life. They ask him, we see you golfing a lot. You love golf now more than boxing? No, not at all. Not even close. I love boxing. Boxing is my life. Family. I love my family. That's what makes me, they ask him, what makes you? It's my family. But at the same time, boxing's my life. I love boxing. So they start to ask him, are you going to manage fighters? You're going to train fighters after? No, I'm not. This is another thing I took from this interview. Once I'm done with my boxing career, I'm done with boxing. And they're asking, wait a second, I thought you loved boxing. Canelo's like, no, I don't love boxing. And that sounds hypocritical, right? I love boxing over here. I don't love boxing here. But what he means is he loves boxing. He loves training. He loves fighting. He loves that aspect of it. But as far as boxing and watching boxing, he is not going to sit there on a Friday, Saturday night and watch boxing. He's just not, fellas. I tried to tell you about this when he was asked about Morrell Jr. after the Ryder fight. The girl asked him, what about Morrell Jr.? He's like, K, who? Who? What? He doesn't know. He understands the landscape as far as he has to learn it, as far as getting titles, getting legacy. Don't doubt me on this. He doesn't sit down and watch boxing and view it the same way boxing nerds do. He can't. How do I know this? When you ask him who the three best fighters in the world are, he says Terrence Crawford, Naoya Inoue, and Tank Davis. Nobody who watches boxing and views it the way boxing fans do would have Tank Davis as a top 3 fighter in the world. He watches Tank Davis highlights. He sees a guy who fights like him. He sees a guy who fights on the tightrope, but he can't put in the proper perspective that a Rolly Romero is not a top opponent, Hector Luis Garcia, because he doesn't watch the sport that way. So he's going to be out of boxing when he's done boxing. I took a lot from that because it shows that he loves the competition aspect of it. He loves the actual fighting part of it. But a lot of times, Lomachenko's like this too, because people wonder, why is it that Lomachenko gives up rounds? Why is it? Why is it he in particular will give up middle rounds, sometimes late rounds against fighters in big fights, and then complain about the scorecards after? He doesn't watch the sport. I learned about this in high school when I see dudes who I play basketball with. They don't watch basketball. My son has a basketball brain. He's 8 years old. I watch him in these 8-year-old leagues, and these kids are falling over themselves. They're grabbing nachos from the side while the game's going on. They just don't understand the sport. They're just out there playing it. And some of them are really good, but they don't understand that when there's a minute and a half left in the game and you're up 8, you're not supposed to be shooting the ball. My son does. He's got a basketball brain. It's going to help him. I wonder, I watch NFL games. How is it that these quarterbacks do not understand? Some of these quarterbacks don't understand how to run a 2-minute offense because they haven't been watching football since they were 8, 9, 10 years old. They watch a lot of film, but they can't put the game into proper perspective. Basketball, the same thing. I go to high school games. I saw this when I played high school. Why are you shooting the ball? We're up 5 with a minute left. Why are you doing it? College games. Why is this dude shooting with 22 seconds left on the shot clock? With a minute and a half left when they're up 7 points. Why is he doing that? They don't know the game. They know how to play it. They don't know the game. Canelo is like that too. Canelo is economical. He'll give up early rounds. He knows a lot about his opponent. But a lot of times, sometimes these guys, that is one of their flaws, is they don't understand time management. They don't understand that part of it. how to feel out certain fights. I don't know. But I'm telling you this because Canelo doesn't view the sport the way boxing fans view it. But the beautiful thing is our interests align because he does very much understand legacy, and we like fighters who go after legacy, the boxing fans. But he's not going to view Morrell Jr. the same way boxing fans do. He's not going to view David Benavidez the same way some of these boxing fans do who are building these narratives. He's not going to do it. He sees this guy with no title. He watches him fight. He's got a style that they've said that's a style that Canelo does not duck. That's a style that Canelo would rather fight. He sees all that, and he's probably confused. Like, why would they think I'm scared of that guy? It just is what it is. But this is going to be a great fight. This is going to be a fun fight. There's a lot on the line. And the more I think about it, the more I think Mel is going to have a stand in this fight and make it competitive and make it interesting. But his undoing, I believe, will be he's going to be outgunned in the later rounds. It's going to come down to who can land the bigger shots. It's going to come down to trades. And I can't see any other scenario in which Canelo doesn't get the better of that on the back end. But it will be competitive. The more I think about it. Mel brings a certain amount of dragon energy. Don't let the press conference fool you. I don't think he's here for a paycheck. I don't think Mel fears anybody. I don't. I think they very much have the same energy. They've sized each other up. And it's going to be what it's going to be in the ring. And I do believe that Mel, for the first time in his career, at least for a long time, he doesn't have to sell a fight. He's looking across and said, that dude's going to sell a fight. Just by showing up, he sells the fight. I don't have to do anything. I'll show him respect, and then I'll go after it in the ring. That's what the press conference is. You'll have these dudes out here over-analyzing fights psychologically, how fighters look at press conferences, which fighter looks away quicker, all this stuff, what they're wearing. But at the end of the day, these two guys respect each other, but they're going to try to knock each other's head off. That's what it's going to come down to. But they don't have to sell the fight. And that's what you saw yesterday. But I'll go back to it. I hope these dudes keep going to non-boxing media outlets because we actually get more of who these fighters are. We get more into their brains and their minds, how they think, how they view the world, how they view the boxing landscape, when they can go into these outlets and let their guard down. You don't have to worry about these boxing nerds looking for clicks because they're in a smaller media space and they need to reach for clicks coming at them sideways. They can just let their guard down and be themselves. And that's what we saw with Canelo. He's in his pajamas, silk shirts, just sitting there comfortable. Just sitting there comfortable. And I enjoyed that. And I would also tell you, for those who showed late, please go to the beginning of the show and look at the inactivity report because we need to be demanding more of these fighters. I don't agree with the pins. If you're a once per year fighter, you should not be fighter of the year. It's just, I'm rigid on that one. That's rigid. You can't fight one time and be fighter of the year. I'm sorry. You can't do it. That'll always be my position on that, and I'll always be rigid on that. On that note, see y'all tomorrow. God bless.